My name is Officer James Carter. I've been a police officer in the small town for almost 10 years. I've seen my share of weird and wonderful things during my time on the force, but nothing could have prepared me for the night that changed everything. It was a dark, stormy night that kind of makes you want to stay home and curl by the fire. But duty called, and I found myself patrolling the deserted streets, my headlights cutting through the dense fog. As I drove, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. The town felt empty, too quiet. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Suddenly, my headlights flickered and died, plunging me into the darkness. I cursed under my breath and fumbled for my flashlight, but it was nowhere to be found. Just when I was about to give all hope, I saw something out of the corner of my eye. It was a figure, standing in the middle of the road, tall and slender, with long flowing hair that danced in the wind. I couldn't make out its face, but I could feel its eyes boring into me. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, watching me. I tried to speak, but my voice caught my throat. Slowly, the figure began to move towards me. Its steps were silent, as if it were floating across the room. I wanted to run, but I cannot move. I was paralyzed with fear. As the figure drew closer, I could see its face. It was a woman's face, but it was twisted and contorted into a grotesque mask of hatred. Her eyes were empty sockets, and her mouth was a thin, cruel line. The figure reached out a hand, its long, sharp nails glittering in the moonlight. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The hand closed around my throat, and I felt myself being lifted into the air. I struggled against the figure's grip, but it was no use. It was too strong. I could feel my life slipping away as the darkness enveloped me. When I woke up, I was lying on the side of the road. My head was pounding and my throat was sore. I looked around, but the figure was gone. Had it all been a dream? I got to my feet and stumbled back to my car. As I drove away, I couldn't help but wonder what I had seen that night. Was it real or just a figment of my imagination? I never saw the figure again, but I never forgot that night. It changed me forever. I became more cautious, more vigilant. I knew that there were things in this world that we cannot explain, and that there were forces at work that we couldn't control. A few weeks later, I was called to investigate a disturbance at an old abandoned house on the outskirts of town. The house had a reputation for being haunted, and people said that strange things happened there. I approached the house cautiously, my gun drawn. The windows were boarded up, and the paint was peeling. The whole place had an eerie, unsettling atmosphere. I knocked on the door, but there was no answer. I tried the doorknob, and it was unlocked. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The house was dark and dusty. Cobwebs hanging from the ceiling, and the air was thick with the smell of decay. I could hear rats scurrying in the walls. I made my way through the house, calling out for anyone who might be there. But there was no response. I was about to give up when I heard a noise coming from the basement. I followed the sound to a door at the end of the hallway. I turned the doorknob and opened the door. The basement was dark and damp. A single light bulb flickered overhead, casting eerie shadows on the walls. In the center of the room was a large wooden table, and on the table was a body. The body was that of a young woman. She was laying on her back, her eyes wide and staring at the ceiling. Her body was covered in blood, and her throat had been cut out. I gasped in horror and backed away from the table. I had seen death before, but nothing like this. I called for backup and waited for other officers to arrive. As we carried the body out of the house, I couldn't help but wonder who had killed her and why. The murder of a young woman remained unresolved, and the old abandoned house became a more notorious. People said that her ghost haunted the house, that even she had been wandering the hallways at night. I never went back to that house, but I never forgot what I saw that day. It was a reminder there were things in this world that we cannot understand, and there were forces at work that we cannot control. As years went by, I saw more and more strange and unexplained things while on duty. I saw ghosts, demons, and other creatures that defied all logic. I learned that the world is a much darker and more dangerous place than we ever imagined. But I also learned there are good people in the world, people who are willing to fight against the darkness. I learned that in the darkest of times, there is hope. I'm still a police officer, and I'm still fighting against the darkness. I don't know what the future holds, but I know that I will never give up hope. In the eerie solitude of the moonless night, Officer Mark Williams found myself patrolling the desolate outskirts of a small town. The oppressive silence was punctured only by the rhythmic ticking of my watch, a constant reminder of the passage of time in the sinister realm. As I cruised down a dimly lit road, my headlights cast fleeing shadows on the dilapidated houses and overgrown lawns. The atmosphere was thick with tension, like a suffocating blanket that threatened to envelop me. I couldn't shake the feeling of something was amiss, a primal instinct warning me of impending danger. Suddenly, a flicker of movement in the shadows caught my attention. I slowed the patrol car and peered out of the window, my heart pounding in my chest. There, in the dim glow of a broken streetlight, I saw a figure, tall, emaciated, and draped in what it looked like a tattered black cloak. It stood motionless, its piercing eyes locked into mine. A surge of icy terror coursed through my veins as I realized that the figure was approaching my car. Its movements were slow and deliberate, as if it were stalking me with malicious intent. I fumbled for my radio, desperate for a call for backup, but static filled the airwaves, mocking my pleas for help. The figure drew closer, its skeletal hand reaching out towards me. I slammed the door shut and reversed the car, trying to escape its grasp. But to my horror, the figure vanished without a trace, only to reappear in front of my car, blocking my path. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles turning white with fear. The figure's glowing eyes seemed to bore into my soul, sending shivers down my spine. It was as if it could see through my flesh and into the very depths of my being. With a sudden burst of adrenaline, I hit the gas pedal and swerved violently, hoping to throw the figure off balance. The car lurched and skidded it, throwing me against the seatbelt. In the ensuing chaos, I caught a glimpse of the figure stumbling backwards. Seizing the opportunity, I put the car in drive and sped away, leaving the eerie figure behind. As I raced through the empty streets, my mind raced, trying to process the unimaginable horror I had just witnessed. I reported my encounter to my supervisors, but they seemed to dismiss it as a hallucination brought on by stress. I couldn't shake off the feeling that there was more to it than they believed. The piercing eyes, the skeletal hand, the vanishing act, all of it pointed to something sinister and otherworldly. Days turned into sleepless nights as I grappled with what I had seen. I became paranoid, constantly looking over my shoulder, afraid that the figure would return to finish what he had started. The once familiar streets of my own town now seemed like a labyrinth of hidden threats. Every night, I patrolled with underlying fear that the figure would be waiting for me, lurking in the shadows, ready to claim my life. The piercing glow of its eyes haunted my dreams, turning my nights into a living nightmare. As time went on, the people around me began to notice my change in behavior. My once jovial demeanor had been replaced by a hollow shell, a constant reminder of the terror I had witnessed. My relations crumbled, and I became reclusive, consumed by dread that lingered in my heart. One fateful night, as I patrolled the desolate outskirts of town, I noticed a flicker of movement in the shadows. My heart skipped a beat as a cold shiver ran down my spine. It couldn't be. I thought to myself, it couldn't be real. But as the figure stepped into the dim light, there was no denying its malevolent presence. It was the same towering, emaciated figure with piercing, glowing eyes and a tattered black cloak. It hovered there, its hand outstretched as if were reaching for my soul. Fear propelled me into action. I hit the gas pedal, swerving to avoid the figure's grasping hand. But as my car sped away, I caught a glimpse of something horrifying in my rearview mirror. The figure was running after me, its skeletal legs pounding against the pavement. I swerved violently, nearly losing control of the car. The figure continued to pursue me, its relentless footsteps echoing in the silence of the night. In a desperate attempt to escape, I slammed on the brakes and got out of the car, hoping to confront the figure head-on. As I faced the creature, my heart pounding in my chest, it raised its skeletal hand, its glowing eyes fixated on mine. I felt a surge of icy terror as the dark energy coursed through my body, paralyzing me with fear. In a moment of pure desperation, I reached for my gun and fired blindly into the darkness. The bullet hit the figure, sending it tumbling backwards. It let out an ear-piercing shriek that shattered the stillness of the night. As the echoes of the gunshot faded, I cautiously approached the downed figure. I drew closer. I saw that its glowing eyes had dimmed and its body had become a lifeless husk. The nightmare was over, but the scars of that night remained. I remained the unimaginable horror that lurked beyond the veil of our reality. I had faced my fears and emerged a changed man. And as I returned to my duties, I carried with me a newfound determination to protect my own town from the darkness that had threatened to consume it. The piercing chill of the night seeped into my bones as I patrolled the desolate streets, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness like a beacon of hope amidst the fear. As a seasoned police officer, I have seen my fair share of horrors, but nothing could have prepared me for the nightmare that waited me on that fateful night. The call came in over a radio, a frantic whisper reporting a disturbance at an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. Dispatch informed me that several suspicious individuals had been lurking around the premises, raising concerns among the nearby residents. With a heavy heart, I gripped my service weapon and made my way towards the eerie location. The warehouse loomed over the horizon like a malevolent spectre, its crumbling facade and shattered windows casting an ominous glow in the moonlight. As I approached cautiously, the sound of distant sirens filled the air, adding an element of urgency to the situation. As I entered the warehouse, my senses were assailed by a pungent odor that made my stomach turn. Dimly lit by a flickering bulb, the coverless interior revealed a scene of utter chaos and depravity. Broken furniture, discarded clothing, and blood-stained walls hinted at unspeakable horrors that had transpired with those cursed walls. As my eyes adjusted in the dimness, I noticed a lone figure huddled in the far corner of the room. A young woman, her body trembling uncontrollably, whispered a single chilling word that helped shivers down my spine. "Help me." Cautiously, I made my way towards her, my gun raised in front of me as I prepared for the worst. As I got closer, I saw that her face was contorted in terror, her eyes wide with a fear that spoke of unimaginable torment. She pointed a shaking finger against a shadowy figure that stood at the opposite end of the warehouse. "He's over there," she muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. "He killed my friends." My heart raced as I turned towards the direction she indicated. There, amidst the scattered debris, lay a horrific sight that froze the blood in my veins. The body of a man, his face twisted in an eternal grimace of agony, lay broken in the lifeless end of the cold concrete floor. As my gaze fell upon his body, I knew that I was not dealing with an ordinary criminal. This was the work of a serial killer, a monster who extinguished the lives of countless innocent victims. A surge of anger and determination coursed through my veins as I realized the gravity of the situation. Without hesitation, I charged towards the shadowy figure, my hand drawn and my senses heightened. As I closed in, he turned to face me, revealing a face that would forever haunt my nightmares. His eyes, cold and calculating, held a malevolent glint that sent a chill down my spine. A crooked smile twisted his lips as he raised his hands in a mocking surrender. "Well, well, well," he hissed, his voice a raspy whisper. "Look who's come to play." He took a step towards me, his movements fluid and predatory. I could see the madness in his eyes, a reflection of darkness that he had inflicted upon the world. In that moment, I knew I was in the presence of pure evil. "You're too late, copper," he taunted. "The game is over. You cannot stop me." With lightning speed, I lunged at him, tackling him to the ground. A fierce struggle ensued, our bodies thrashing against the cold concrete floor. He fought with the strength of a madman, desperate to escape my grasp. As we grappled, I could feel his cold, dead eyes staring at mine, promising a future filled with torment and despair. His laughter echoed through the warehouse, a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurked within the human soul. But I refused to give in. I had sworn an oath to protect the innocent and bring justice to the guilty. With renewed determination, I overpowered him, pinning him to the ground as my handcuffs snapped into place. As the last vestiges of resistance left his body, a look of defeat crossed his face. The malevolence that had once burned in his eyes flickered and died, replaced by a cold emptiness. I had captured the serial killer, but I knew that the horrors he had inflicted would forever haunt the memories of those he had left behind. As dawn broke, I stood watch over the monster I had upheld. The warehouse, once a heaven for darkness, now stood as a symbol of hope and justice. As the first rays of sunlight pierced through the shuttered windows, I felt a sense of profound sadness mingled with a fierce determination to never let evil triumph. The arrest of the serial killer was a victory for all those who had suffered at his hands, but I knew that the scars of his crimes would run deep, leaving an indelible mark on the collective consciousness of our community. As I solemnly escorted my prisoner to the waiting police car, I couldn't help but wonder how many other monsters lurked in the shadows, their evil deeds waiting to be discovered. In months and years that followed, I dedicated myself to investigating and apprehending other serial killers determined to rid the world of their vile presence. The horrors I witnessed during that fateful night forged within me an unbreakable resolve to fight against darkness and bring justice to the innocent. And as I continued my relentless pursuit of evil, I knew that the memory of the warehouse and the monster I'd captured will forever serve as a chilling reminder of the darkness that can reside in the human heart. The frigid air shot through my uniform as I stepped out of the patrol car. The darkness enveloped me like a suffocating blanket. A gruesome discovery had been made in this desolate alleyway, as it was my duty to confront the unspeakable horrors that lay before me. I had spent countless nights on patrol, witnessing the grim realities of human nature, but nothing could have prepared me for this. As I approached the scene, a pungent stench permeated the air, nauseatingly familiar to me from years of experience with death. The glow from my flashlight illuminated the grisly spectacle, once destined to forever haunt my dreams. The lifeless body of a young woman lay sprawled across the cold concrete, her eyes wide with terror, her body bearing the unmistakable marks of a brutal assault. I swallowed hard, forcing down the rising bile that threatened to overwhelm me. This was not just a crime scene. It was a sacred space where innocence had been extinguished. With trembling hands, I began to collect evidence, with each piece another fragment of a twisted puzzle that I was determined to solve. Fingerprints, vibers, anything that could lead me to the depraved individual responsible for this heinous act. As I worked, my mind raced, piecing together the fragments of information that had led me to this moment. The victim, a promising young college student, had vanished without a trace just days prior. Her family, distraught and desperate, had clung to the hope that she would be found alive, but the gruesome discovery in the alley dashed their dreams into oblivion. I had encountered countless criminals in my career, but though the serial killer lurking in the shadows sent a chill down my spine. The methodical nature of the murder, the precision of the body had been concealed, all pointed to a predator who revealed his twisted fantasies. I knew that I had to stop him before he claimed another innocent life. Driven by a mix of determination and dread, I delved into the darkness, following every lead, no matter how tedious. I interviewed witnesses, poring over surveillance footages, and reached out to every informant I knew. Days turned into sleepless nights as I relentlessly pursued my quarry. The grim discovery in this alley had become an obsession, a wound that festered within me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the victim's lifeless stare, heard her silent screams. I knew that justice had to be served, that the monster who had taken her life had to be brought to account. With each passing hour, my resolve grew stronger, fueled by a righteous anger that burned within me. Then, one fateful night, a breakthrough came. A witness stepped forward, providing a crucial piece of information that linked the victim to the local bar. I wasted no time raiding the establishment, hoping to catch the killer in the act. As I burst through the doors, my senses were assaulted by the stench of stale alcohol and cigarette smoke. The bar was crowded, filled with motley crew and patrons. My gaze scanned through the room, searching for any telltale signs of guilt or fear. And then I saw him, a man sitting alone in the corner table, his eyes locked on the pool table. His face was ordinary, unremarkable, but there was an unsettling aura about him, a predatory gleam in his eyes. I knew in my gut that he was the one, the monster I had been hunting. With a calculated precision, I moved towards him, my hand resting on my service weapon. He sensed my approach, and his eyes fixed on mine. In a brief moment, I saw a flicker of recognition, followed by a cold, impersonal calculation. He knew he was caught, and he was ready to face the consequences. As I placed him under arrest, he offered no resistance. He had been expecting this, waiting for the inevitable moment when his reign of terror would come to an end. As I led him to the bar, he turned to me, a strange look of resignation in his eyes. "You can't stop me. There are others like me, you know. You will never catch us all." His words chilled me to the bone, a grim reminder that the darkness I had encountered tonight was just a small part of a much larger horror. But I was not deterred. I was sworn an oath to protect and serve, and I would not rest until every last shred of evil had been eradicated from our streets. The trial that followed was a grueling ordeal, a relentless assault on the senses. The detail of the victim's murder were laid bare, each gruesome revelation another sickening twist of his knife. The killer, a man named David, listened impassively as the weight of his crimes was laid before the jury. He showed no remorse, no empathy for the lives he had shattered. In the end, justice prevailed. David was convicted on multiple counts of murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As he was led away in handcuffs, I felt a sense of closure, knowing that I had played a part in bringing this monster to justice. But the scars of the night will never truly heal. The memory of the victim's lifeless stare, the cold, calculating eyes of the killer would forever haunt my dreams. I'd seen the abyss, and it had changed me. I was no longer the same idealistic young officer who had entered the force with a naive belief that the world was just a fair place. The horrors I'd witnessed that night had opened my eyes to the raw, unforgiving nature of human evil. I knew that the darkness would always be there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the opportunity to strike. But I knew, also, that I had a duty to stand against it, to fight for the innocent and the vulnerable. And so, I continued my patrol, haunted by the memories of the past, but driven by unwavering determination to prevent the future horrors from becoming a reality.